Hey everyone, and welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast, where we talk to building geniuses throughout the commercial real estate and building automation industries, asking them how they've gotten where they are, who's walked alongside them, and how they're helping others along the way. We have done it. We have made it a second season. This is our season finale of season 2, episode 12. Thank you so much for everyone that's been listening and commenting and sharing. Really, really appreciate it. And for anyone that's new, don't worry, we're planning on a season 3. We'll start working on that later this summer, but I am your host, Tim Vogel. In today's episode, we're speaking with Zorba Manolopoulos of Walmart. Hey, Zorba, welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast.
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be here. I'm real happy you finally started letting non-geniuses on the podcast, and happy to be the first one.
Well, the list was growing short, and
yes.
I had to start looking elsewhere. No, honestly, thank you so much for being on. You and I, we were part of a panel, I think it was last year at the IBCon event, and we were talking about sensors and, really all kinds of things about IoT and IoT sensors. And just that little bit of exposure to you was really interesting. Your experience, especially working at a company of such scale, right? You don't think in terms of dozens of buildings or hundreds of buildings. You think in terms of thousands of buildings. So, that's a pretty unique space in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's definitely been very different of late, really. We're at 5,000 stores. Well, used to measure in real estate in square footage. Now we just count number of buildings because it's just so large. It is new for me to get to the scale of thousands of buildings is wonderful, though. It's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about what you do for Walmart, what your role is, and kind of what you spend most of your time doing these days.
Awesome. Well, I manage a team of product managers, and our realm is specifically around IoT. We will do smart buildings, smart stores. We'll connect to various pieces of equipment around the store, whether it be HVAC systems, refrigeration systems, vacuum cleaners, not vacuum cleaners, but cleaners for refrigeration. We connect to produce scales. We are connecting to fryers, ovens. We're looking at tags to put on inventory as it goes through the supply chain. Really, we're connecting to anything that Walmart has. And that's what makes this job so enjoyable, is just the variability and of course, the scale. I'll say scale a bunch of times, but that's kind of what my role is. But my team really engages with different business units around around Walmart, and we figure out how we can leverage telemetry to make our store operations more accurate, more efficient. We try to make sure that the customer is constantly getting the product they need, so that when they walk into a store, that it's there, it's available, it's of high quality. We like to keep the ice cream frozen, for example. And so that's kind of our main objective when we go through this, is how can we maintain our product availability for our customers when they come in? And we do that by leveraging IoT.
And so how long has there been a dedicated department? I guess, would you call it a department or a division of the company that's been doing this or focused on IoT telemetry and gathering data?
So Walmart's always used data for many, many years. And probably about 5 to 7 years ago is when Walmart really started leveraging a lot of telemetry that was really just sitting there in controllers. And about 4 years ago, they said, this is really something, and we need to really accelerate in the telemetry area. And so a lot of what was done roughly 5 to 7 years ago was around refrigeration. But the benefits were just so immense, and the return was great. And of course, we reduced product loss, and that means, again, I'll go back to the ice cream. Ice cream was available for sale more often. That just led to really having more of a core IoT team formed. And so that was roughly about 4 years ago.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Now, you talk about going into each of these different departments and areas within the stores: HVAC, IoT, produce, tagging, refrigeration. Is it difficult to understand these individual components? Because each of them, have their own little nuances, right? I mean, how do you handle that as a team? How do you work through that to then say, we're going to solve this problem of a system that perhaps we know very little about?
That is a great question, and really, while difficult, it has been one of the best parts of this job. Is I love learning, and I've never stood in front of a fryer before and cooked fried chicken, or dumped some mac and cheese in there and done a boiling bag. I've never baked bread in an industrial oven, and so when these things were brought to us, I was like, okay, so we got to figure out how these things work. So it really was just engaging with the OEM, the company that makes the equipment, and saying, hey, you gotta let me know, you're the fryer expert, or you're the produce scale expert. Teach me how this thing works. Then store visits. I'm in the store. I'm standing next to the store associates as they operate the equipment. And in some cases, I did get to operate the equipment a little bit, which was also fun. But you really have to, as any product manager will tell you probably, you really got to get in there and understand the user. Understand those personas. And part of the user and persona in these particular cases, especially when it comes to IoT, and it's not HVAC per se, but HVAC still has the same issue, is that you have to be the person that works with the equipment. And you have to understand that and go through usage models. Why do they do this? Why do they do that? And really truly understand that. And then get into the equipment and the way it was meant to be used. Because sometimes those differ. How we use equipment is maybe not necessarily how it was intended. I'm sure everybody's probably screwed in a screw with the edge of a knife. Probably not the way it was intended. Yeah. But anyway, so we'll go through that and we'll learn a ton of stuff about the equipment. But really the challenge then became this equipment wasn't necessarily built to be networked, wasn't necessarily built to have its data extracted at the frequency or the volume that we are intending to do that. So this is where we had to sit down and describe what an oven was in data. What did that mean? We went from, hey, we have this oven and it's currently it's currently collecting this telemetry for use in its operation. And then we had to start adding to it, well, wait a minute, what data do we want it to send to us? And what data is it not collecting? Because we wanted to know that. And so really it was, we created a spec. And I started a spec where I was just describing equipment in a data model, similar to how HVAC has it with BACnet, right? There's a kind of an agreed upon set of variables. We didn't have that luxury when it came to other pieces of equipment. So we had to develop that. And then we had to, of course, create user flows. And then the data extraction began. And that was working with a great set of OEMs who wanted to get their equipment networked. They wanted telemetry to flow. But you know what? There's just a lot of stuff with getting data out of equipment that might be 20 years old at some point. Right. So it's difficult.
Yeah, and that equipment could be halfway through its life cycle, and it does not make financial sense to replace it. So how do you work with a new piece of equipment that perhaps does have built-in telemetry and integration capabilities alongside this old piece of equipment? Works just as well, works just as intended, but doesn't have that native capability, right? I mean, that's some of the challenge.
Yes, and that was really a second part of the purpose of the spec that we created, was now we could go out and say, hey, on the next models or the next revision of your equipment, here's things that we want you to put in. Because maybe the last time we had a contract or a purchase order, telemetry wasn't even a thought, wasn't even mentioned. And now we want to kind of give that to our OEMs and say, hey, here's some things we want for your future. If you can retrofit, awesome. But maybe your next model, we want some of these features. Now, of course, this all came through a great conjunction with what is the business value. And we had to really have larger objectives because it wasn't just, we don't just gather data for telemetry's sake. We really had to achieve something. So I'll use a bakery oven as an example. We have a great set of ovens, but what we needed to know was when was the steam happening? And some of our ovens would tell us, hey, I'm in a steam mode. And for those of you who don't know, when you steam bread in an oven, it actually crisps the outside, which is a great thing. But If there's no water in the pipe and the oven says turn steam on, it didn't steam. The oven just thinks it's steamed. And so what we wanted to do in further versions of an oven is say, hey, let's not just get the info that you got a steam command. Let's find out if there's water pressure. Let's see if there's water flow. Let's check out the humidity of the oven to see if it changed, because that way we know for a fact that the steam did happen. And then when that steam happens, we get good bread. If we don't have steam, we don't get good bread for our customers. And we really want our customers to get that nice golden brown bread.
And so that was my next question. You have these business values or objectives for each of these projects. What's the goal of that project? But then there are broader goals as well. There are these primary goals. Can you talk about some of the primary goals that you guys always keep in focus?
Absolutely. I think there's two at Walmart, and they're great. I love them. I didn't come up with them. They've been here for decades, but the first one is the customer's number one. That is what we want to do. We want to make product available. We want to sell them what they want to buy. We want to make sure it's available and high quality all the time, so that you walk into a store, you know you can get what you want. The second one is everyday low prices. And that's, if there's something that's driving IoT on the financial side, it's that we do things so that we can maintain price points. If we spend too much money operating a store or operating the supply chain, then we have to cover our costs. But if we can be more efficient, be more effective, target our usages, that way that we don't spend a lot of money getting the product from the supplier all the way to the store so that the customer can then buy it, and we can maintain everyday low prices. And that's been something we focus on a lot when it comes to IoT, smart buildings, smart stores, whatever you want to call it. That's what we're focused on. Is we don't want product to go bad. We don't want your ice cream to melt. We want it to be ready and available, and that you're happy, and we do it in the least expensive way that we can.
Yeah. And do you measure part of your project success around those two metrics? I mean, does this benefit the customer, and is this maintaining our lower prices?
Well, the first one I think is more of a value. We don't have a major metric. Obviously, we do take feedback from customers, but the better one is product availability. And so we do look at sales in a department. We look at product loss. We look at product availability. We want to make sure that things are available, especially in the supply chain side. If we can make sure that a store has proper inventory, we just had Easter. Well, you want to make sure all the Easter stuff is there and available at the right time so people can purchase it. So we do go all the way back to that. And we, like for ovens, we measure how many successful baking cycles we have. We measure how many buckets of meat we fry in the fryer. We look at all of that. And so you can think of it this way: when the fryer's down, we're not making product for sale. And that's the direct impact. So if we can monitor equipment and know when the bakery oven is down, then at that point we know that the sooner we get it back up, the sooner we can start making product for our customers.
No, it's excellent. It's always good to have those guiding lights, and guiding lights that you can feel good about, right? Okay. It's
yes.
Not necessarily just profit margin and did we meet some perhaps arbitrary corporate goal.
Absolutely. It really is that satisfaction of the customer coming to getting what they want when they come to the store. Customers, they wake up, they get in the car or bus, however they get to us, and they spend their time arriving and getting to a Walmart store. And product availability is important. And then but beyond availability, that product that might be available has to be of quality. We have to make sure it's of a quality item for our customers to buy.
So Zorba, it's a fascinating job, right? It's a fascinating opportunity to be able to make huge impact. I mean, you go and you talking about scale, you go and you make this change, or you monitor this piece of equipment or this device or this system. that then provides a better customer experience. That customer wants to come back. That customer, gives a 5-star rating, whatever the outcome of that is. But, ultimately it's like you're serving people, and you're serving people across these over 5,000 stores. So like, really it's an amazing opportunity to be able to do that. But how did you get into the position that you're in? I mean, we could either take one step back and just figure out like what that transition was, but there's a lot of context there. I mean, how did you learn? I mean, maybe let's start with how you started your career, and what was some of the things that then led to being able to have this opportunity.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a long time back. I started, I was in high school, and somebody got me a job through a science and inquiry program I had. And what I was doing was, oh boy, what was I doing the first job? So my first job, I was really kind of looking at data and seeing how much electricity was being measured at a small business or a large residential building. And it was fun. It was very interesting. We gathered lots of data. I was telnetting into controllers or data loggers and extracting data, and they'd go on a tape reel. And I know that kind of dates me, but I would say I'm not that old. I think it's more that's the technology we were using at the time.
Sure.
And then we would pass it off to our data scientists. And that's kind of where I started. And then I stayed in facilities for a while, but really picking up chemical waste, for example. I was doing that, but I quickly got into operations of that because I felt that we really weren't operating properly. And that was my first step into we can use technology to improve how we work, how we operate. And at this time I was 18, and boy, I was forward, if you will, maybe a little overconfidence. Maybe I still am, I don't know. But
yeah.
I still remember the team meeting we had, and we're sitting around the table and we were having issues, and our boss, who was great, kind of opened it up and says, anybody have any ideas on how we can fix this? And this was kind of a general, what's going on with our ops. And I raised my hand and I said, I've got a solution. And I kind of said some things that weren't the best way to say stuff. But my boss looked at me and said, can you fix this? Can you do what you just said? And I said, yes. And so at that point, while I was still doing the work, I was actually coming up with a better process, and we were leveraging technology to improve that process. And from that point on, I really kind of knew what I liked to do. And that was use technology to leverage operations. It didn't matter what it was. We were picking up chemicals for disposal with, I've been in business operations where we were doing delivery of construction equipment. The same thing there. But that was kind of where I really got that love for it. Now fast forward like 20 years and I was working in in the construction industry, and Microsoft gave me a call and they said, you want to come do IoT for the real estate group? And I jumped at that. I thought it was the best thing. And I was going back to Microsoft and saying, hey, look, this is where technology is born. This is great. And I realized that real estate in general was still behind in technology adoption. That's not to say Microsoft wasn't doing anything, but just in general, it really wasn't still there. And Microsoft had this great cloud platform. And so, boy, we got in there and we just started leveraging a bunch of technology that Microsoft had and really just trying to improve operations. So that was kind of, I know I kind of jumped around there a little bit, but that's really how I realized that what I was doing as my first job, extracting telemetry from equipment, today it's just called IoT. And it's great. And I think it's a wonderful area. And the best part about it for me is that it's merging two worlds that I've always loved to operate in, and that's the physical world and the digital world. Yes. I love technology. I love data. I love operations and the physicality of things, and this really allows you to work in both. I'm in a store now at Walmart. I'm in a store at least once a week, just trying to figure out how things operate, how people are using technology. And that's the important thing, because we can use all this tech all you want, but it really comes down to how do people use it and which way will they use it the best.
Let's talk a little bit about your experience. You said that you were in the construction industry and Microsoft came calling. What were you doing in the construction industry?
I was advising some construction builders, some residential home builders, and I just got done running a construction supply company, where we were supplying anywhere from shelving to windows, anything that a builder would need. And then we had restoration companies, those who'd come in after severe damage. And so I was showing them how technology can improve their operations. And so I was just working with a bunch of those companies, and that's what I was up to.
Did you have a connection at Microsoft or someone that was able to, kind of say, hey, I met Zorba at this or that, or, how did that connection get made?
Not to my knowledge. No. I got an email and said, we'd like to talk to you about IoT.
Wow.
I know that I had built some software, basically an ordering system. And I know that some of the people I talked to in the area really thought it was novel, and I was getting lots of discussions with them, but none of them were from Microsoft. Yeah. But what I had done was I had built an ordering system that our customers could log into, place an order. It was directly connected to our vendors because we had to order windows, not from us. We didn't make windows. We had to order them. And then the POs also came back into the system, and then our delivery drivers all had iPads. And so they were taking the orders to our customers. And this was all in one system. That's the only thing I can think of that might have sparked anybody having interest in listening to me at all. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
But Walmart found out about me because I was working at Facebook, and Walmart was trying to do smart buildings. They were building a new campus in Arkansas. They really wanted to leverage telemetry and IoT, and they came to Facebook. And Facebook was already supplying them with technology. But before Walmart said, hey, what do you know about smart buildings, smart campus, IoT? And so I got pulled into the engagement with Walmart and kind of showed them what I was doing at Facebook. And then shortly after, I got some interest and found a team that was working on IoT.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I came over.
Yeah, you named another big one there. I mean, did you jump from Microsoft over to Facebook?
I did. Facebook was building a new campus, and I got an offer I couldn't refuse.
Sure.
So I came down to Facebook and moved my family to California.
Did you learn anything about that Facebook experience that is kind of been helpful around the work that you're doing for Walmart now?
Yeah, I think it's more of the difference between, it wasn't necessarily Facebook, but it was the difference between corporate real estate and retail. So we can go back with Microsoft, we can go to Facebook, and you can even go back to the energy consumption we were doing at small business buildings, right? The difference really is a building in many cases that houses employees is more of a cost center. Now, we want buildings to make the employees better, more effective, more efficient, happy. We want them to. The occupant experience is very important for employees, but a building is still part of that cost center. It's not what the company does. And so companies like Microsoft and Facebook, they're not in the business of buildings. They're in the business of software, and they do a great job at it. Walmart, the buildings are the store. The stores are where the sales happen. And that's been the difference. So I learned a ton of great skills and learned a lot about technology from Microsoft and Facebook. The main difference moving was that they could apply to the direct revenue stream in a retail environment. Yeah. And that's been exciting. A store is viewed as a cost of goods sold. I'm not saying that's how it's actually accounted for, but that's sort of the view, is that it's the method to deliver product to our customers. And so therefore a store needs to operate efficiently, because that's how we get product all the way from the dock through the back, the back inventory, to the sales floor, to the shelf. All of that is how we deliver the products to our customers. And that is very much beneficial. And it's a nice way to leverage IoT.
So it's interesting, that the building being a cost center, obviously important. It doesn't decrease value, but it is a cost center versus then a revenue center. Is that how you would maybe put it?
Yeah, just, is it part of the revenue stream? Is it directly impacting how money is made? I think a little bit you can see that with COVID, right? When COVID hit, a lot of people went home. A lot of people started working from home. The building didn't necessarily impact the revenue stream for many companies. I'm not saying there was no impact. I'm just saying it didn't have as big a one. But retail stores had to stay open. Restaurants had to stay open. If those buildings weren't open, then the revenue stream would have been greatly diminished. Yeah. And that's the difference I'm talking about. It's not zero impact. It's just the difference in impact is very different from a corporate real estate perspective than it is to a retail environment.
So you and I have talked recently, and Emmanuel Daniel, and you spent some time with him while you were at Microsoft. And one of the things that Emmanuel and I talked about on the podcast was this human-centric approach. Now, I imagine that human-centric approach that you've learned at Microsoft has carried over now into this customer-centric approach, because it sort of primes you, right, to have that kind of mentality. Can you talk a little bit more about what you learned from that kind of approach and working with him and the rest of that team as you navigated what is the primary purpose of what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I remember one of my first days at Microsoft, and the gentleman named Ron Town was there, and I talked with him, just ramping up. And boy, if anybody would just slam into my head Occupant Experience, it was Rob. And it wasn't that I didn't get it at the time. It was so central. And that was the amazing part. It was the central part of the discussion. And it was the central part of what we were trying to do at that time. And so an occupant experience gave purpose, gave meaning to a piece of technology. And it also meant that usability, not functionality, needed to also work. So a lot of times you'll put something in and it's functional and it does what it's supposed to do. And maybe you got that 80%, the old 80-20. You got the 80% because it's functional. But now you can start going after that 20%, and that 20% does matter because that's usability. And that really is where that occupant experience comes in. So for example, you can always schedule a conference room. So functionally, can people schedule a conference room? Of course they can. Can you make that better? Absolutely. That is one thing I will say I definitely picked up when I moved to Facebook. Their ability to reserve and unreserve a conference room was amazing. The manageability of conference room space was incredible. The screens, the Zoom, the video conferencing rather, was amazingly cared for, and the user, the employee, was thought through the entire way. And so the experience of having a room was no longer, did I reserve a room when I set up the meeting? It was, I can have a space to have a meeting. And that was the big difference. And so the occupant experience, sure, you can transfer that over to a retail environment. But I'll tell you, when I came over to Walmart, customer number one Yeah, they didn't need to be told about Occupant Experience. The customer's been number one. We chant it every day. It's something that's said constantly at Walmart. So it was a great, easy move when you have that as part of your culture at Walmart, is that the customer is number one. But the experience part still applies. So while we sit there and say, hey, is there bread? I'm just going to go back to the bread. Is bread available? Sure. But can the bread be hot? Can the bread be perfectly cooked? Is your ice cream at the exact frozen temperature that it can withstand the ride home? That's that next level. That is what we're talking about. It isn't just good enough to have product on the shelf. Can they find it? Do they feel good? Do they feel safe shopping in your store? And that's where that customer is number one, but it also brings in occupant experience in the corporate real estate jargon. Definitely important.
Did you go to college?
Oh, yeah. I'm a graduate of University of Washington up in Seattle. I got my electrical engineering degree, and then I got an MBA as well through their executive MBA program.
So why an MBA?
So I was an electrical engineer, and I did a bunch of work, and I couldn't figure out why. When you're an engineer, a lot of times you build stuff, you invent stuff, but the why really bothered me. And I wanted to know more on the why. And we would have all these meetings, and finance people and business people would show up, and I just felt I was disconnected from them. And so I really wanted to have a better connection. And so I remember talking to my boss about that, saying, hey, I really feel like this is where I want to go. And they were, at the time I was working at Intel, and Intel was fully behind me and helped me return to school to get my MBA. But that's really was the first step into me getting into product management. So becoming a product planner or a product manager, that was needed as well. And I knew that what I really wanted to do always was create product. But did I actually have to do the building? No. I knew what needed to be built, and I could leverage wonderful set of engineers to do that, who are probably way better than I ever will be. But an MBA also gave me purpose. It's that this is why this product is necessary, because a lot of what I do is figuring out not just the what, but why do we need to build this? Why are we extracting telemetry out of an oven? Why? Oh yeah, sounds good. What if it goes down? Sure. But what's the why? What's the big why? And that's really got me. So I went back to MBA just so I could figure out why I was building all this stuff. And little did I know that set me on the path I am right now.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? One of the things that I've seen time and time again is the people that kind of cross-pollinate, if you will. Say, I'm going to get the technical side, but I'm going to get the business side. Or I'm going to get the technical side, and I'm going to get the marketing side. It's like you kind of have these converging ideals or mindsets. And when you could blend those together, you get a better idea of exactly, just like you said, purpose and why things are happening or decisions are being made, or why we're making this thing as opposed to this thing. And it's really, really, so when you said electrical engineer, I said, I bet there's something else there. That's when I was like, there it was, MBA. That's great. And you said that you were at Intel. What were you doing? So you were an electrical engineer at Intel at the time?
I was. So Intel won a contract with Microsoft to build Microsoft's first gaming console. Well, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if it was their first game console. I really don't know. But it was the Xbox. And so I got brought onto Intel to help be on that hardware design team to build the Xbox hardware. And I was over the TV out and the memory subsystem of the first generation Xbox. And it was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was. You can't say no to that type of opportunity. And
that's right.
It was a great challenge. We were sticking a lot of stuff down on motherboards at the time, writing firmware. We were doing HD TV on these things way back when, just testing wise, right?
Yeah.
But that's why I got pulled over. And so I stayed with Intel for a while. But after the Xbox was done and we gave it to Microsoft, that's when I moved into product planning.
Was that again? You talk about impact. I mean, that was one of those pieces. That and the PlayStation going back and forth. Just trying to one up each other a little bit and just bring in the best gaming experience. I mean, those are powerful computers shoved into those little boxes, and they almost downplay sort of the power that's in those things, and the price point then that they bring those to market is really kind of amazing. Just the whole kind of mechanics and the economics of that.
Absolutely, you're spot on. And really, what we built back then is nothing. Now let's try that again.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
All right. So you're spot on. The Xbox, the PlayStation, that whole thing, it was hot. That's why I was excited. But the stuff we built back then is nothing compared to now. I mean, the power-wise, I mean, just the computing power alone is so different. I mean, what are we at now? 20 some odd years ago. But what we built was great, awesome. I'm proud of what the team did. But yeah, seeing where it goes, and truth be told, I like the challenge. I was there going, boy, they're going to go up against PlayStation. I don't know if that's going to work, right? But boy, did I want to be part of that, to say, let's do it. Let's see what we can. And then you fast forward today, and you're right. It's Xbox, it's PlayStation. They're right there, and it's a great piece of history. And I'm glad to see that they're both still successful going on right now.
Yeah. And you got to be a part of it. And what's interesting is you talked about, you said that you were part of the TV out, and what was the other component you were part of?
Memory subsystem.
Yeah.
For the first generation Xbox, we actually put memory chips down on the motherboard instead of in a DIMM slot. So we didn't know how to do that, and so that was part of why I got pulled in. Was all the PCs at the time used memory cards, right? The little thing you put in there, and so how to put memory chips down on the motherboard, that was my role. And so I had to come in and make sure that there was no noise, no filtering, and that this memory system worked. And then we had to cost reduce it, which was fun. Fun. I got it functional, but then you have to go, okay, well, how many capacitors can you take off now, Zorba? And so I spent a lot of time with an oscilloscope. They're just, all right, one more capacitor off. Let me see if I can measure all the noise on the memory. And I was watching all the frequencies go by, and then pretty soon, it froze. Okay, put that capacitor back on. And
the metaphor behind, you being a part of the TV out. I mean, that was the thing that everyone would, that's what they plugged into, and then you turn it on, and all those kids' faces are glued to the TV, just waiting for it. So it's like, that was where all the result took place, and that's where it went out of that box. And it's like, so every single eye that's ever played an Xbox, can look back and say, I should thank Zorba.
Maybe just those early years.
That's fine.
The display chip has been replaced well since I was involved.
Yeah. Who chose this first one? Yeah, like, what is this? Man.
It's the things though. It was amazing. I mean, we were our test video was a dolphin spinning in a circle, and that was the loop. And so we would sit there and watch a dolphin hours a day, just looking for any type of glitch. But going back to one thing that you did say, that mixture or that cross-pollination of skills, to be in smart buildings, I do think you have to have that. I really do. It's good skills, and you can come from anywhere. You really can. You can be a software developer, you can be a hardware developer, you can come from actual operations side. Either way, being multidisciplined is what's going to be important. And I was just fortunate in my career to not only be in facilities or be in real estate in the business side of things, but have written software, I've written firmware, I've designed hardware. I've operated the equipment. At one point, I used to operate a forklift. I had my license. But having all of that together is something I think that is very necessary when you come to smart buildings. I think it was actually in the panel we were in. I said something to the effect of, if it was easy, we just turn all the lights off to save power.
That's
but
right.
Users or employees want to be in the building. So therefore, it's not that simple. We have to have the lights on at a certain amount of time. Okay, so at what temperature do we want to do that? What color? What lumens? What are the factors that we have to do? And then of course you schedule the lighting, and then you got sensors that auto turn on, auto turn off. All of those things. But that's because you're understanding that people use the facility. Now, of course, that's an easy example, right? Yeah. But it's the premise. That's the philosophy that I go by, is that you need to be able to have an understanding of what's really happening, and being single focused. It's doable, but it's not optimal. You really need people who understand multiple areas in smart buildings.
Yeah. Like you said, that multidiscipline approach, we talk about it all the time around things like indoor air quality and comfort and energy savings, and having to balance all of these while also saying, oh yeah, and net zero. And so, okay, well, what is most important? Because we could absolutely hit net zero, but like you said, by getting rid of this building. And now we've done it. We're done. And it's like, yeah, but now these people are working in the rain and they don't have power, and they're cold. It's like, all right. So we need something. And so how do we do it? How do we gauge what the priorities are, list them, gauge them, weight them, and then make decisions based on that, recognizing that there's going to be compromise somewhere. And so where
absolutely.
are we willing most, to compromise? And typically, people are fickle, right? It's not going to be their comfort.
Absolutely. But I think that's where occupant experience comes in. And that's why it's so key, is that, well, how do you judge that? If it's not just sustainability, if it's not just turn the power off, if it's not all these things, then what are we trying to do? And that's where it comes into occupant experience, or again, the customer is number one. So there has to be a higher goal to what you're doing. And that's where you get into the why. I said, I wanted to know what the why is. And of course, there's the 5 whys. You keep asking why, and then you get to the real what's going on. That latent need is so important. And so how do you decide how much you keep the lights on? The occupant experience is what helps decide that. And then you can decide on what level of occupant experience you want to provide and calculate an ROI on that. So, we talk about lights on, lights off, but really it's kind of interesting. We build buildings, we don't put windows on them. And so we need lights. Okay, well, let's put windows on them. So we put windows on them, then we put blinds in front of them, and then we have to put lights in again. Yeah. So really what you're talking about when you say lights on, lights off is the occupants of the building need to have a certain amount of light. It doesn't matter where the light comes from. Mm-hmm. And that's the occupant experience. So if it doesn't matter where the light comes from, now that changes the discussion of when should your lights be on or off. It doesn't matter, because what the goal is that every associate or every employee has the right amount of light for what they're doing. And of course, too much light creates glare, right? So even there, you're trying to figure that out. And then you're going, okay, well, now I can't have glare, but I have some people that work better in the dark. A lot of people work in CAD. They like to have a dark theme on their software, and they like the lights low. Okay, so now, see, again, it's about the occupant experience, about establishing what personas are there, what experiences they're going to have, how are they going along that journey, and then making the decisions against that. And that will tell you when those lights go on and off. That will tell you when bread needs to be baked and ready. Like, when do people shop, for example? It doesn't matter if you have nice, fresh, hot bread at 6 a.m. in the morning if no one's buying bread from you at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Right. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it's working at 6 a.m. It just doesn't. So that's the thing to start looking at, is what is the occupant? What is the customer going to do? And that determines your ROI, and that determines your feature set.
How did you get connected to Realcomm? Have you been going to Realcomm for a while, or IBCon for a while? How did you get connected? I guess really, ultimately going back to how we met. I mean, how did you just get tied into that group at all?
So I had joined Microsoft, and Realcomm was looking for a speaker. And of course, they didn't ask me first. And this wonderful gentleman from CBRE, who just happened to be in the building when I was there, said, "Hey, we just had a speaker drop out. Do you want to come talk about IoT and AI and, new technology?" And I said, "Sure, not a problem. Let's do it." And so I was added to his panel. And that was kind of my first time at Realcomm, IBCon. And that's where I met, excuse me, that's where I met Jim. And from that point on, I just was engaged. He kind of connected me with a bunch of people at Realcomm. And then I got invited back to their other conference called CoreTech. And I spoke there as well. And ever since then, it has been one of my favorite conferences to go to.
CoreTech?
CoreTech and Realcomm IBCon. So both of those. I met a lot of great vendors in the exhibit halls. I met a lot of great people, just like my peers at other companies. And that was probably the biggest value I got, really, was meeting all of these people and saying, "Hey, what are you doing in the space? What am I doing in this space?" And just that collaboration of just sharing in a non-competitive way, because it didn't matter. We were all just trying to make our office buildings better.
Right.
And so I met a lot of people, met a lot of contacts through there, but I also learned a ton. I would attend people's sessions, listen, and then of course I proactively stayed involved with the people running the conferences. And that's what kept me connected, right? That's why I kept getting invited back, is that, if you proactively just keep in touch, when things are going. So it's a great set of conferences.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't for that one time, just that one time where somebody dropped out, there it was.
Yeah. Yeah. So you weren't a conference speaker before. You hadn't really participated much in speaking or panels, anything like that.
Oh, not in real estate. So when I worked at Intel, I presented at the Intel Developer Forum. I presented in front of city and government bodies. I've done universities where I've presented to college classes. So I'd presented publicly before, but not in a real estate environment.
Sure.
So it was more other forums. But it was kind of all the same, right? You stand up.
Yeah.
I still remember a big one. So this was a 1 year after 9/11. And so it was 9/11, 2002. And so of course it was the anniversary, and we were at an Intel Developers Forum, and security was one of the main themes at this developer forum that year. And, our CEO gave the keynote, and I was the first presentation right after the keynote. And I was in the security track. Now I was just the lead, like I'm the opening act. I was the
right.
junior people out of everybody. My session was standing room only. And this is, I easily sat 300 people in this room, because they were expecting the people after me to have a big audience. I was, again, just the opening act, but everybody came. Everybody showed up to that first one. And here I am standing in front of the room, and I give my presentation, no problems. And as always, you open up for Q&A, and they just started asking question after question about what the CEO just said, and all these higher strategic level stuff that's supposed to happen after me. And I'm a little bit of apparently I was good, but I felt like I was deer in headlights. But my boss said, "No, you look good." Well, my boss was in the back, at the very back, right? As the questions were going, he's going, "Cut it, cut it, cut it."
Yeah.
So that was my very first presentation at Intel. That's how I got involved. But it's the great story. I love what happened. I met a lot of people because they thought, oh, well, he's the next presentation in security after the CEO. It must be important. No, farthest from the truth. I was just
chief security guy. That's who you are. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, that was the thing. I got done, and I went to the actual important security people. I said, "You guys needed to be first next time." This is what I think.
Oh, that's great. Has public speaking always just been natural for you? I mean, does that kind of go back to your perhaps overconfidence?
No, it's I can sit there and say shy. I don't know if I was shy, but I was timid. I'll go with timid rather than shy. Sure. And I always liked talking, but putting myself out there was very difficult.
Yeah.
And so it was more timid. Again, I'll meet somebody one-on-one. I'm not shy at all. So public speaking wasn't something that I was necessarily natural to me. But I started to learn how to talk, how to kind of talk with people. I learned other languages. And so that really gave me a little more just confidence in speaking. But the main thing that kind of got me over my hump of public speaking was the necessity to do a knowledge transfer. And so my public speaking started small, meaning I would present to like 4 or 5 people because I had to. And then it would go to like 15 people because I had to transfer information to them. And then it started going into departments. And just as my career grew, I had to present or transfer knowledge to other people. And so it was a little bit out of necessity, but I wanted to. And that was the other thing. So I started small. If I had gone from nothing to 300 people, I probably would have never done it again. But it wasn't going to happen. I presented one time at Intel's sales and marketing, probably the largest audience I'd ever had to present in front of. And I remember just afterwards going, oh, that seemed like the same to me. And it was the same because I really only saw the first 6, 7 rows. I looked up and looked out, but it was just 6, 7 rows for me. And the people in the middle, never saw them, never noticed. And I just kind of go with that. But now I like speaking, and so that I really want to share knowledge. I had a great manager. Well, actually, she was my skip level. She really encouraged me to speak up. And I was one that didn't really want to speak up that much. And she's like, no, you need to speak up for clarity. And she sat next to me and she was poking me and she goes, no, you need to say something. And I'm like, no. She goes, no, clarity. You need to make sure it's clear for everybody. So if something's not correct or accurate, Zorba, you have to speak up. And that really changed my perspective on public speaking. Not that was my purpose in public speaking. Sure. It's just, if I had any issues left over, I knew I had to do it just for clarity. That was like the last little bit that held me back.
I don't know how many times, I'll send an email and it'll just say, for clarity, comma, is this exactly what you, because, there's some gray area here in the things being said. And it's the clarity. I also like the way that you've put the necessity to perform knowledge transfer, and recognizing that, it is highly valuable to use your words and to use your words well and clearly. And, that's one of the things, I talk about this a lot when we're doing these podcast episodes, because that's one of the purposes of this podcast, is to get people to tell their stories and to talk about how they got where they are and how there are these people that encouraged them, so that they can now turn around and encourage others as well in those similar ways. Encourage those around you to speak up, encourage them to step into areas that are more uncomfortable for them because they're not familiar with it. Well, you know what? That's happened to literally every single person, and those are the moments where you grow. And the times you break and fail, those are the times, most times, you stand back up and you go back at it and you do it better the next time and you don't fail and you succeed. And those are the things that people primarily remember.
You are spot on. You beat me to it, actually. The necessity actually came at a point where my function kind of changed a little bit. You get to a certain level where, you're growing, and then all of a sudden it's like, now you need to grow other people. So when you manage a team, you have to grow these others, and they may not have had the same experiences. They definitely haven't had the same opportunities. And so knowledge transfer was also a way to grow others. If I've done all these things, great, but you don't want to have people have to experience the exact same thing just to learn it. So if I transferred that to them, then they could benefit, they could grow. And that's what I want out of my team is I just want. Yeah, absolutely. And that whole failure thing, that's something I think that is new. I really do. I don't remember my early years where my manager was upset if I failed. We had safety concerns, and there was you definitely don't want to fail when safety is involved. And that's so, right, It's not like my manager wasn't, it didn't want failure in that area. But in general, we were free to make mistakes, and we were free to fail because failure is learning. I coached baseball for way too many years, but baseball is a game of failure. And every year I'd have my parent meeting, and have a parent meeting. Of course, then I'd have my players as well. But the same type of thing would happen in both. Is I would explain that baseball is a game of failure. So your kid is going to go up, and they're going to strike out, and it cannot be disappointing. And I got to a point where I was even telling parents, I go, it better not be a disappointment to you, because your kid's up there hacking, and your kid's just not going to get ahead every time they go up. It's just not going to happen. And the old saying is, if you bat 300, you're in the Hall of Fame.
That's right. That's right.
And so that's 1 out of every 3 times that you're going to succeed. That means 2 out of 3 times you're failing. You might not even hit the ball, but even if you do hit the ball, you're not getting on base. And I really want parents to understand that. But more importantly, I really wanted my players to understand that. That we are in a phase of try, of attempt. And this isn't about, hey, I did my best, but no outcomes. No, this game is about failure. It is. So it will happen. That is the outcome. Obviously, in business, we want better outcomes. But now translate that to what we're doing. We're on the edge. We're out in front. We're going to try lots of things, and we will fail. It's just going to happen. What do angel investors always say? I got to invest in 10 places because 9 of them are going to fail and 1 will succeed.
That's right.
Right? It's that type of stuff to where when we're leading a team, they have to feel free to fail. They have to feel free to not succeed. And I know that's just sounding like the same thing, but it is different. Because if they don't, then they're going to be scared to try new things. And trying new things is innovating. If you are discouraging people from innovating, then, we're doing it wrong. So
that's right.
Innovation spawns failure. But innovation and failure together is going to spawn that new idea that will work. But give your people a chance to fail. You have to. That's the only way you're going to get cool stuff. It's the only way.
Well, that is an extremely encouraging word to me, and I'm sure it is to everyone else that's listening. Zorba, thank you so much. One of the things about this, and I'm so glad that I was able to have you on, is you give this, you prefaced it earlier by saying, perhaps I was overconfident, and perhaps I still am. But your boss said, does anyone know how to fix this? And what you said is, I raised my hand and I said, I can fix this. And that's the mentality that we all got to have. And that's the mentality that you're taking to your job every single day. And that's the job what I want to take to my job every single day. So thank you for being an example of that and continuing to go out there and reminding us that it's all about those, what are those primary goals, and keep those focused, take risks, be innovative, and just keep doing good work. So thank you, sir. I really, really appreciate you coming on and having this conversation and helping me close out season 2 of the Building Geniuses podcast.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for having me. This has been a wonderful discussion. Always love talking with you. And, I'm not used to closing stuff out. I'll tell you that much. But it is exciting being here, having these types of discussions. And yeah, if you think you can, you can. And if anything, just for everybody, there's no more hurdles. Technology has advanced so much right now that you can do whatever you think. So if someone says you can't, I bet you still can. So go for it. Try it. Let's change the world. I'm ready. I love it to get. Tim, I love it. You can just change the world. So anytime. Happy to be here, Tim. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, that wraps this episode of the Building Geniuses podcast and also this season. So watch out over the next couple months. As we start working on the next one, we'll start making announcements, and season 3 will be coming soon. But this is a production of KMC Controls, and if you've enjoyed this conversation, we encourage you to like, subscribe, and share. And if there's anyone that you would like to see on the podcast next season, tag them in these comments or reach out to us. We could tag them also. And as always, we appreciate you listening. Until next time, learn something new, teach someone something, and build your inner genius.